Okay, last week was a crazy day. I've been preaching this sermon series called Building Lives Through God's Eyes, and I got inspired last week at the end of service. EJ, why don't you show that video of what happened? Whoa. Whoa. Wow. All right. Show a video of that. There I am, walking. I'm giving Sam Funk the microphone. And, oh, there I fall. And then there I fall again. Now look at it. Isn't it great these guys come over here to try to help me out? There I'm falling slow. Now, you also notice that as I'm falling, Adrian is getting up. I don't know if she knows what's going on. Go ahead and shut that off, EJ. I thought we could make a lighthearted of what happened last week. At the end of the service, Josh Lane came up to me, and he had the movie file in his hand, and he says, he puts it in front of my face, and I said, "What you got there?" He said, "About $10,000. Surely it would all go back to the church, right? Even though I was the one that fell. And I thought about that all week long, and boy, your pride just gets hurt, doesn't it? And I'm so glad that people, I heard the gasp, and people cared about you, but you have to laugh it off, because sometimes we all fall, don't we? We all fall, and we have to get back up. And so I had that in my mind all week long, and the only story I could think of to talk about in the Bible from falling and getting back up is the story of Peter. You know, Peter denied Jesus 3 times, and then later on he was restored back into ministry. And my sermon title today is Failure Turned to Follower. Failure turned to follower. On the back of your flyer, there's a place if you want to jot down some notes. You can follow me in that sense. If not, just hope you enjoy the message today. Let's look at Mark 14. And of course, Jesus and the disciples are at the Last Supper, and he takes the first communion and washes the disciples' feet, and then he comes and has this going on. And he's basically telling the disciples, you all are going to desert me. After they've been through all this together, right? So Mark 14, starting with the 27th verse, reads like this. You will all fall away, Jesus told them, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. But after I have risen, I will go ahead of you into Galilee. Peter declared, even if all fall away, I will not. Truly, I tell you, Jesus answered, today, yes, tonight, before the rooster crows twice, you yourself will disown me 3 times. But Peter insisted emphatically, even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you. And all the others said the same. I'd like to first point out that it wasn't just Peter who was going to deny Jesus. It wasn't just Peter who was going to be cowardly and run away. They were all going to do the same thing. They were all going to say, we don't know who this Jesus is. But because Peter opened up his big mouth, he gets singled out. And he says, not me, God. They might do it. They don't love you like I do. They're not as strong as me. They don't have it together like I do. They're all going to fall, but I won't. I'll be with you thick and thin. Have you ever been promised by somebody to be there through thick and thin and they don't show up? What a letdown. What a disappointment. What a sad thing to lose friends and family who said that they would love you no matter what, and yet somehow it goes away. And it's a very simple thing, but I think we need to talk about it today. And that this is your first line, is Peter's pride led to his fall. His pride led to his fall. His pride set him up for a test. His pride let the old devil say, okay, we're really going to see if you're really going to come through with what you said. You remember back in the 80s? George Bush says, read my lips. No more taxes. He cashed a check that couldn't cash, right? Wrote a check that he couldn't cash. He said it, but he had other forces working against him. Peter said what he wanted to say, but he did not even know his own heart. he didn't even know that he could handle the stress test of his master, of the Son of God, dying before him, being ridiculed and tortured. Your whole life just being a wreck. Have you ever felt like you put your all into everything and then it all gets cut away? You begin to say different things. You begin having different types of thoughts. You may have to go back on your word because it just didn't work out the way that you planned. Peter's pride, it made him fall. His arrogance said that everybody else may fall, but I won't. We've all had a hint of that. We've all been in that situation to where we think that everybody else is wrong, but we're not. Not everybody else can take care of this problem, but I can. I've never been as dumb as them, or I've never made their mistakes, but yet every single one of us has fallen short of the glory of God. It is so easy to mask our problems. It is so easy to mask our inadequacies. It's so easy to mask our weaknesses if we can point them out in other people. If we can say, they're the messed up ones. They're the dysfunctional ones. Me and my family, we got it together. And I'll tell you, that's the height of dysfunction if you don't believe. If you believe you're better than somebody else, or if you believe that they can't do what you can do. When you put the focus on like that, your pride is swelling up. And I guess I'll tell you this, if your pride is getting too big, the fall is coming soon. That pride comes right before the fall. For some reason, Peter, he had this self-righteousness inside of him, that even when the Son of the living God was saying, this is what's going to happen, for him to still say in arrogance, no way. See, that was part of his problem. No matter what happened in front of him, no matter what miracle Jesus did, no matter what amazing feat he put together, this man, Peter, still thought he was in control. Still thought he was in control. Let's go on in the story. While Peter was below in the courtyard, this is also Mark 14, starting with the 66th verse, one of the servant girls of the high priest came by. And when she saw Peter warming himself, she looked closely at him. You also were the Nazarene, Jesus. With that Nazarene Jesus, she said. But he denied it. I don't know or understand what you are talking about, he said, and went out into the entryway. And when the servant girl saw him there, she said again to those standing around, this fellow is one of them. Again, he denied it. And after a little while, those standing near said to Peter, surely you are one of them, for you are a Galilean. He began to call down curses, and he swore to them, I don't know this man you're talking about. And immediately the rooster crowed the second time, and Peter remembered the word Jesus had spoken to him, before the rooster crows twice, you will disown me 3 times. And he broke down, and he wept. I find it interesting that the first person that came up to Jesus was just a small girl, calling him out on the person that he was supposed to be. And he gets angry about it. And then a man and other people, they begin saying, hey, you were that Galilean. You are a Galilean. You were with that Nazarene. And he denies it. And then the third time, he denies it. And what is it to resort to when you have the truth facing right in front of you and you're not willing to deal with reality? The cussing comes out. Boy, that came out really loud too. The words start flaring. Hurtling, not being... I tell you what, if someone is using bleep, 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 and bleep, 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 and I guess if it would be in the text, there would be a bunch of asterisks and question marks and exclamation points of, what is this guy saying? We know what those words are, and when you use those words, you're out of control. Out of control. Somebody told me earlier they fell down and they said a couple cuss words. This is not for you. I didn't pull this out on you. God bless you. I didn't want you to think that I was calling you out. I understand that sometimes you lose control. Not that I'm saying that you need to lose control, but I understand sometimes there's things that we just don't feel like we have together. Here's what I think. And I want you to see that the rooster crowing and there being darkness and light is a metaphor. And it's this: the darkness in Peter had been exposed by the light. The darkness that was in him. The stuff that he wanted to keep hidden. The stuff that he didn't want anybody else to see. He was ashamed of being a follower of Jesus. Because he didn't want to go through the torture either. He was scared. And how appropriate that when that rooster goes, it's a Mexican one. He sat there in the darkness all night long, and you all know the rooster. I mean, I'm not a farmer, but for those of you who are farmers, doesn't the rooster crow at dawn? Okay. But at least it starts in the morning, right? When it wakes you up. And so here it is, the daytime, exposing what's going on inside of him. And bringing back to remembrance what Jesus said, showing that Peter was never in control, but Jesus was the whole time. Peter losing his temper, Peter losing his words, Peter telling lies, being in denial, and the light is shed. I tell you what, I get on Facebook, and I've got, I won't say his name, but I got someone that I'm very close to, and he's a total atheist, all that type of stuff. And we go back and forth on it, because I love him. And whether he likes it or not, whether you like it or not, or whether I like it or not, sin is real. Yeah. Sin is a real thing. Sin is a trespass against God. It's not going with God's statutes. And if you really think that you can hide those things, if you really think that you're going to get away with those things, if you really think that you're not, and you and I are not going to answer for those things, guess what? The rooster's going to crow one day, and Jesus is going to come back, and you're not going to be ready. Yeah. That eastern sky is going to crack open, the Bible tells me. Yeah. The trumpet is going to resound, right? Yeah. And guess what? All of man's and all of women's, all of teenagers and all of children's thoughts will be judged by God. There isn't going to be no hiding place. And you're not going to be able to deny it anymore. I do not say this to make you go into fear. I say this to be real with you. As real as Jesus was being with Peter. You're going to fall. You're going to deny me. Exposed by the light. Some people may come to church. You put on your smiles. You put on your cologne. You look good. But yet, you and your wife are thinking about divorce. You are having a hard time with your kids. The person you're sitting right next to, you're just putting that smile on because you don't want anyone to know that you are going through a hard time. I'm telling you, the light will come one day. I remember my pastor, he told a story of how, my pastor Mike down in Marion, he told a story of how he was preaching and how the father, he was preaching a hardcore sermon against sin and how the father was amening him and was right there with him during the sermon, and the whole time his son was sitting right next to him just shaking his head. Because that father was out having an affair. And through the body language, the child was letting know that what goes on here is not what goes on at home. I tell you what, any sin you have, it will be exposed. Especially if you're a Christian, because people who are not of the light really like it when you mess up. Because Satan knows that if you and I mess up, it just gives another reason to say there is no God. Don't ever think what you're doing or what I'm doing is not going to come to justice, that it's not going to come to the light. The darkness of Peter was shown by all, and now he had to look himself in the mirror, and he hated what he saw. That rooster crowing must have made him cringe. That rooster crowing showed him for who he was. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that's a bad thing. It's a good place to start if you are being in denial, if you are not dealing with the issue that's inside of you, if you're not dealing with the issue and you're blaming this person, that person around you for the things that you do and the way that you feel and how you curse and how you treat other people. One of the most immature things you can do is say somebody made me do that. Who's in control? Not you. You're just like Peter, living in the darkness. Sin has a funny thing. Even sins that we do 10 years ago, 20 years ago, they just have a funny thing of popping up and biting us back in the rear, don't they? You think you get away from it? You know what? Here's a funny thing too. Sins that people even do before they're a Christian sometimes come back and bite them. I have a pastor friend of mine who was, I call it BC, before Christ, right? Right? He got divorced, and a church didn't want him to come and preach at their church because he was divorced. But the thing was, he had gotten divorced before he was a Christian. And he's been with the same wife for over 30 years now. Sometimes the things that we do even before we become a Christian haunt us and stick with us. So teenagers, I tell you, make good decisions. Don't allow Satan to make you think that just because everybody else is doing it, I'm going to do it too. I tell you what, if you can stay pure and holy during this time, it'll even be easier as an adult. Because you are such in a pressure cooker right now. And know that things that we do will be exposed. Have you ever tried to lie to your parent and they knew you were lying? And if mom and dad can figure that out, why do you think God is oblivious to what's going on? John 21, let's go on with the story. From a different text, but I want us to look at this. Oh, I want to say too, let me say this too. And I was reading, and I think it was in Luke, there's the same portion of, or the same stories in there. It tells it from a little bit of a different angle, and it says that while they're in this this building or where they had to take Jesus for questioning and stuff, when that rooster crowed, Jesus looked directly at Peter. Could you imagine that look? How uncomfortable would that be? When you just got done denying Jesus and he looks at you. This is what Peter's going through. And so Jesus, of course, dies. We all know the story. He raises up again, and he walks on earth for a while. And this is the part of the story that we come to. We see Peter fail, and now we're going to see Peter be restored. Verse 1 says this, afterward Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee. It happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, also known as Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and the two other disciples. Let's see here. Two disciples were together. I'm going out to fish, Simon Peter told them, and they said, we'll go with you. So they went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. He called out to them, friends, haven't you any fish? No, they answered. He said, throw your net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some. And when they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. And then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." And as soon as Simon Peter heard him say, "It is the Lord," he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and jumped into the water. And the other disciples followed in a boat, towing the net full of fish, for they were not far from the shore, about 100 yards. And when they landed, they saw a fire burning and coals with fish on it and some bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish you have just caught." So Simon Peter climbed back into the boat and dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish, 153, but even with so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." None of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came, took the bread, and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. This was now the third time Jesus appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. I want you to see that Jesus takes things back. Remember when he first called out the disciples? What were they doing? Fishing. Remember he said, "Hey, go back out and throw your nets on the other side." And they looked at him like he was crazy. And said, "Okay, we'll do whatever, frustrated or whatever." They've been through this with Jesus before. They knew it was the Lord. And when he said, "Go ahead and throw your nets down," they started pulling up fish again. And you remember the story of the loaves and the fishes? Here is Jesus having what? Man, this is awesome. Breakfast. Don't you love breakfast? I think if it was today, Jesus would meet me at Diamonds and we'd have some eggs and ham and some toast. I made Adrian French toast yesterday morning. I'll make some good French toast. I love breakfast food. Here's Jesus having breakfast with his disciples, doing life again. And they dared not ask who he was because they had a relationship with him. They didn't have to bring up all those things. They knew where they were at. They were at the presence of the Lord. And I tell you what, when you're in the presence of the Lord, you got to let him bring up things that he wants to bring up. I want you to see this. Remember the metaphor of night and day? The rooster crowing at dawn? Here's your next line. Peter denied Jesus at dawn and was given a second chance at dawn. Even though the light exposes who you and I are, the light also gives you and I a second chance. It gives us a chance. It gives us a chance to ask for forgiveness. It gives us a chance to be restored to who we are, because we know what Peter ends up doing. Peter, who denied Jesus soon after, within a month or two, gets up in front of a crowd and 3,000 people got saved. Not because of Peter, but because of who? Jesus. Being restored in the light, as he is in the light. You might be afraid of the light because it might expose who you are, but if it gets you down to who you are, Jesus can work with you. If you deal with the things that are not so good inside of you, and you'll just keep on rolling around in the dark, and you'll hate the light, you'll try to get away from the light. That's why some people don't come to church, because they don't want to deal with God. They don't want to deal with God. Here he is with his second chance. I love what Simon Peter did. He was in that boat, and he didn't even wait for the smaller boat to go ashore. He jumps in the water and starts swimming. He gets to the shore as quick as he could, and the other guys are paddling. "Wait up, Peter! We want to see him too." Peter couldn't wait, and Jesus said, "Hey, go get some of your fish." Don't you love it? That's when potluck started, right? You bring your fish, I bring my fish. Ain't nothing wrong with the church potluck, right? Nothing wrong with the fish fry, right, Dan? Danny Pratt can make one great fish fry. Over a meal. Over, hey, just me and you. Let's start repairing what's been broken. There's people here this morning have once experienced the light, have once experienced God do great things in your life, and you need to sit down and have breakfast with Jesus again. And go back to those things that you first did. It's like in Revelation, going back to your first love. Maybe you need to go back and repeat some of the things you did. Maybe you need to go back to that place that you received God. He was given a second chance. Aren't you glad you got a second chance? I'm glad I've had my third, fourth, fifth, and sixth chance. Some of you just need a second chance. You didn't know you could get a second chance. For some reason, I don't know what it is. I can't explain it. But God loves us. And He did that by sending His only begotten Son. He loves us. That while we were still sinning, He proved it by sending Jesus to die on a cross. He loves us. He wants to sup with us. He wants to have a relationship with us. I wonder, how was your Sunday morning like? Are you jumping out of the boat, swimming to get there as quick as you can? Or are you wishing, oh man, I hope the preacher don't point me out today. If he just looks at me, I know he's talking just to me. So I'll just preach like this and hope God, so I don't look anybody in the eye. How do you come to church? Are you dragging behind? Or are you ready to jump in the water and get there right there with Jesus as quick as you can? And I'm just saying that as a metaphor too. Don't be afraid of the light. The light is good. Yes, it's going to deal with some issues that you have, but it's going to be the best thing you do if you deal with them. Let's go on with the story. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said. You know that I love you. See, Jesus is showing His love. Now, here is the thing about a relationship. I may love you, but do you love me too? It's not a relationship if just one person's loving. Okay? Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Then Jesus said, feed my lambs. And again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. Look at here, the third time. He said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And look what the scripture says. Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time. Every single time that Jesus was asking him those questions, he was remembering every time he denied him. Denied him 3 times. Jesus asked him to feed his sheep and his lambs 3 times. He was dealing with the issue inside. He knew what he did wrong. Do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my sheep. Very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. Jesus said, this is to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. And then he said to him, follow me. And this is your last line. Following Jesus means He might take us to a place that we don't want to go. You get in that moment that you deal with the issues. And then it becomes do or do not. There is no middle ground. You can't keep on playing games with God. Our arms are too short to box with God. And Jesus gives us a metaphor. He says, when you were young, you did what you wanted to do. I can remember when I was in college, had my driver's license, had my Mustang. I did whatever I wanted to do. No responsibilities. No responsibilities. Teenager, you remember when you got your driver's license? Who here just got their driver's license recently? Last couple years. You got Laura did, okay. Melissa did. Dylan, isn't it freeing to know you can drive around wherever you want to go? Oh, man. I can remember the first time that I got my car and I wanted to go cruise a strip. You know, hey, Mom, you need a gallon of milk? I'll go to the store for you, right? Just any excuse to drive. When we are young, we do whatever we want to do. We have the health and the vitality. Now, those of you, and don't mean to insult you, those of you that got a little more gray on top, do you find there's less and less things that you can do that you used to do when you were young? No? I think Howard Sargent's still more stronger than I am. He gets more done by 10 o'clock before I do all week. But some of you feel a little more creaks, don't you? Some of you just can't do what you used to do. And you even had parents who have been invalids, and you had to dress them and take them to their doctor and take them grocery shopping because they can't do for themselves. And it's not a bad thing. It's just how life goes. Do you see Jesus' metaphor? When you were young, you had the strength. When you're young, you didn't have to ask for help. When you're young, you didn't have to worry about what everybody else was doing. You could just go your own way if you wanted to. But when you become older, you have to let your schedule work with someone else's schedule. And Jesus even uses this metaphor also. He says that person of elderly age has to stretch out their arms. And what he was doing was he was predicting Peter's death. Do you know Peter, not only was he hung on a cross, but he was hung upside down? Here's Jesus prophesying that. And later on, I didn't keep on going. If you'd like to go later on in some Bible study, you can see that Peter even struggled with that a little bit. Again, he says, well, what about John? Isn't he going to have to do it too? But Jesus says, follow me. You see, following Jesus will be the best decision you've made in your life, but it's not going to bring on banners and streamers all the time. Following Jesus means persecution. Following Jesus means suffering. This is why I have a real hard time with the prosperity gospel. I got nothing wrong with rich people. I got nothing wrong with God giving people wealth. There's something innately wrong in the pimping of the gospel when you are said to follow God so you can be rich. See, here we're seeing surrender. We talked about it earlier. I surrender all. Here we see suffering. Here we see picking up our cross and following Christ daily. Constant struggle. That constant, is God in control or am I in control? It means there's going to be times He's going to take you somewhere where you don't want to go. I'm still praying to God that I can pass out Bibles on the beaches of Hawaii. God bless it. God has me in the soy capital of the world. People say, Decatur smells. Yeah. I guess you get used to it a little bit, don't you? People say, Decatur's losing all kinds of jobs. Why would you want to go there? You know, when is a church going to stand up and try to do something for the community rather than run away? God has called every single one of us in this area. When the going gets tough, do we go running? Or do we know that life is hard sometimes? We keep plowing through. Now, if you get $1 million job in another country, still send your tithe here, please, okay? Just joking. It means He might take us where we may not want to go. See, that old elderly person, they're like, I don't want to go over there today. But that's where everybody else is going. This is how we have to do this. Okay, since I don't have my license anymore, since I have to have your help, I will go where you want. See, it's knowing that you need God's help. It's knowing that you can't do it on your own. And when you know you can't do it on your own, God then takes you places you don't want to go. Because if you want to be young and rebellious, you're going to do what you want to do anyways. Y'all been there, haven't you? I'm going to do what I want to do. There's a song that's helped me several times when I feel like I failed God. And I'm not talking about just sin, but I'm talking about maybe I did something and I messed up. Or I've done something and I didn't like the outcome. Or I've done something and I inadvertently hurt people. And there was times that I did fall into sin and I had to hear this song. A song by Andre Crouch. It's called Take Me Back. And I'm going to have it played. And I want you to think about this story today. Do you have some darkness that needs to have some light shed to it? Is God telling you to go away, to go in a direction that you don't want to go? Well, I'll ask that you just surrender to Him, because you'll be miserable until you don't. It's not about being happy. It's not about having everything work right. I'm just telling you, if you're not doing what God's called you to do, there's always going to be a feeling of distress and a feeling of an abyss. But until you surrender to Him, you get on His plan and His purpose, start going where He wants you to go, you'll have that inner peace that you've never had before. Let's go ahead and play that song. Won't you bow your heads?